is The Composer is Dead by Nathaniel Stookey with the text by Lemony Snicket, which we are going to play for you now. And it is a virtuoso work that not only shows us all the instruments of the orchestra, it's sort of an educational work, but it does it through a murder mystery, which is new and really riveting. If you're interested in that other piece, was written in 2023. That is by, gosh, we just played a work of his. The Devil's Radio. It's just completely, of course. Oh, he's gonna kill me when he finally finds out. Mason Bates. Mason Bates wrote Philharmonia Fantastique, which is for video and orchestra. And again, it goes into the dynamics of the orchestra. It doesn't tell a story per se, but it goes into how the instruments actually work. So you go inside the cello, and you go inside the flute, and you see how the instruments work. But you need to have that on a big screen, of course. So without further ado, I want to introduce our narrator for this wonderful piece, very close colleague of mine for many years. Would you give a warm welcome to Omari Tao?
The composer is dead! Composer is a word which here means a person who sits in a room, muttering and humming and figuring out what notes the orchestra is going to play. This is called composing. But last night, the composer was not muttering, he was not humming, he was not moving or even breathing. This is called decomposing. The composer's death was very suspicious, and so the inspector was called in to find the murderer or murderers and haul them off to jail. I will begin by interviewing all the usual suspects, the inspector said. Like all people in his line of work, the composer had many enemies lurking in the orchestra. They can lurk all they like, but I will find them wherever they are lurking. I will find them if they are lurking in the strings. I will find them if they are lurking in the brass. I will find them if they are lurking in the woodwinds. I will find them if they are lurking in the percussion section. I will find them wherever they are lurking. I will find them! The inspector was a very handsome and intelligent person, not unlike myself. I swear on my own intelligence and good looks, the inspector said, I will solve this terrible crime against humanity and all classical music. And with an intelligent, if somewhat flamboyant gesture, he reached into his pocket and took out the notebook he used for all official business. First, I will interrogate the strings, he cried. Strings? Where were you on the night in question? The violins answered first, of course. The violin section is divided into the first violins, who have trickier parts to play, and the second violins, who are more fun at parties. We were performing a waltz, said the violins. We played graceful melodies, so the ladies and gentlemen could spin around and around and around until they felt dizzy and somewhat nauseous. This kept us busy all night. Notebook. Perhaps you murdered the composer for making you play so much. Don't be ridiculous, the violin said. Violins are the stars of any orchestra. If we killed the composer, we would have to find work at square dances or in romantic restaurants. That's true, the inspector admitted. What about you, cellos and basses? The cellos and basses sighed. The cellos and basses are often weary from dragging their large bodies around. The basses in particular are so enormous that they can't even fit into taxi cabs without sticking their curly heads out of the window. We were providing a compliment, they said. You can't waltz without a reliable 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's boring, but it's steady work. Perhaps you murdered the composer for giving you such boring things to play. On the contrary, the cellos and basses said, we don't feel the need to show off like certain stringed instruments we could mention. Well, I guess that takes care of the strings, the inspector said. Oh, the violas. I forgot all about you. Everyone forgets about us, said the violas bitterly. We play the notes in the chorus that nobody cares about. We play crucial counter melodies nobody hears. We often have to stay late after the performances and stack up all the chairs. We spent last night feeling sorry for ourselves as usual.
notice that the concertmaster was acting strange. She was talking and laughing with the composer and carrying a suspicious black case.
The concertmaster is the best violin player in the entire orchestra and is often accused of treachery.
I was talking with the composer about my cadenza,
She said. A word here which means fancy solo part.
I'd never murder someone who was giving me such an excellent opportunity to show off.
Taking notes in his notebook, but the composer is still dead! The murderer is lurking in the woodwinds. Where were you last night, woodwinds? Speak up! Speak up!
We were doing bird imitations,
said the flutes, the shiniest and highest pitched of the woodwinds.
It seems like that's all we ever do. Whenever the orchestra needs a bird, there we are.
Perhaps you murdered the composer for making you act like birds.
Don't make us laugh,
The flutes cried.
We're much too wimpy and high-pitched for murder.
Such shiny buttons, said the bassoon. You think so? The inspector said, blushing slightly.
And the color is very flattering,
Said the oboes. Really? The inspector said, twirling around. That's very kind of you to say so. But why are you giggling, flutes?
Ignore them.
Said the first oboe, leaning in close.
If I were you, I'd question the brass instruments and say, they're a violent lot.
The brass, the inspector said, writing in his notebook. You really think so?
You can trust me,
The oboe said.
everyone trusts me. After all, I tune up the entire orchestra by playing an A. Listen.
You can't argue that, the inspector said.
Brass, what do you have to say for yourselves? Last night was incredibly important for us,
Proclaimed the trumpets in a boisterous manner. A phrase which means loudly and with a certain arrogant rudeness.
We announced the arrival of kings and presidents. We led soldiers into battle and held a parade when they got home. Our ears are still ringing from all the ruckus. Making you play so loud. We love being loud, the trumpets replied. Brass instruments are brassy by nature. Besides, loud is patriotic, and we suspect the murder was committed by a European.
A European, the inspector repeated.
What say you, French horns? You have a strange accent.
The French horns did not understand the question and began murmuring a story about the old country.
When the world split out loud like a cantaloupe, and the boy and the girl, well, they can elope. This the same sad story. Melon and melancholy. Leave the French horns alone, the trombone said. They were in such a state that we took them out to the club and cheered them up. We ordered a few bottles of expensive wine and then took the stage swinging and dancing until dawn.
percussion instruments can do. We drummed, we percussed, we employed xylophoniness and symbolism. We heard the beat and beat the herd. We struck up and got down. We conquered the concert, battered the band, agitated the audience, rattled the room, and got the phone numbers of several very attractive young neighbors.
By then,
We were beat, too exhausted to commit murder. And what about you, Tuba? The inspector said. Were you involved in these distasteful shenanigans? No, the tuba said. I'm a confirmed bachelor. I was home all night playing cards with my landlady at the harp, taking sips of warm milk from a little blue cup. The inspector flicked through the pages of his notebook and scratched his handsome head with a well-manicured hand. I'm utterly baffled, he said. I've questioned all of the instruments in the orchestra, and none of them seems to be the murderer. The violins waltzed. The cellos and basses provided accompaniment. The violas mourned their fate, while the concertmaster showed off. The flutes did bird imitations repeatedly. The reed instruments have the good taste to admire my jacket. The trumpets held a parade in honor of our great nation, while the French horns waxed nostalgic about something or other. The trombones held too much to drink. The percussion section broke the band. And the two stayed home playing cards with his landlady, the harp, taking sips of warm milk from a little blue cup. But the composer is still dead. You know, after narrating for a while, one just starts to get a little peckish, a little feeling a little hunger. You know, like a snack would be great. Something crunchy, maybe a cucumber, maybe like a chip, something flaming hot, something like that. A strange noise caught the inspector's ear. Of course, he said. The conductor. You've been murdering composers for years. In fact, wherever there's a conductor, you're sure to find a dead composer. Beethoven? Dead. dead. Berlioz, dead. Purcell, dead. Prokofiev, dead. Debussy, dead. Vivaldi, Wagner, Sibelius, Ives, Handel, Britten, Mendelssohn, Scriabin, Liszt, Messiaen, Copeland, Cage, Dvorak, Ravel, Shostakovich, Ligeti, Mustafi, Cornetti, Bellini, Puccini, Rossini, Scarlatti, Mussolini, Bellini, Verdi, J.C.M.O., Symphony, all of them. Dead composers live on the news of the world, and it's all because of one man and one little stick. Arrest that man at once! Not so fast, said the entire orchestra in unison. The conductor didn't work alone. All of us have butchered a composer at one time or another. But we also keep composers alive. Without strings and woodwinds, without brass and percussion, there would be no composing at all. Except for various kinds of non-orchestral music. If you want to hear the work of the world's greatest composers, you're going to have to allow for a little murder here and there. But that's injustice, cried the inspector. Those who want justice, said the orchestra, can go to the police. But those who want something a little more interesting